I will start sharing my screen. So hopefully you can all see the slides now. So as I've said, please do use the question and answer function. There is no question that is silly at all. They are all valid. And also use that function to let me know if I'm going too fast or too slow, and things like that as well, because I can't see any of you when I present like this. I can simply see my screen. So bear with me if I don't notice you waving your hands around. I think also please hold in mind that you know yourself and you know the children that you care for as we go through this. And some of what we suggest will be right for some people, but not for others. Some of it will be right for neurotypical people, and some of it will be more helpful for neuroatypical people. So just keep a reflective view on it as we talk through. The other thing I'd like us to all hold in mind is to look after ourselves. I think a lot of you would have been at work all day, so you may well be at the end of a long hour's work. So please do take a break, take time to get yourselves a drink, to stretch, and to be really gentle with yourselves as we go through the next hour and an hour and a half-ish. The strangeness of the last year, it has been really different for everybody. Whilst we've all been in the same storm, hurricane, we've all been in different boats with different people and different resources. So also please look after yourself and bear that in mind as we go through today's webinar. We need to be gentle, as I've said before. What we're going to try and do today, and this is my goal, is to talk about why staff wellbeing matters in the classroom, to look about the mechanisms of how it does actually, how our own wellbeing impacts on the children that are around us, to spend a bit of time exploring what wellbeing actually means, because it is one of these words that's around a lot at the moment. We hear it everywhere, and it probably has different meanings to everybody as well. And then to share with you some of the tips and strategies that we found to be really helpful for your own wellbeing, and they come out of the research that we've explored and collated. Okay, so without further ado, let's move on. So the question of why does staff wellbeing matter in schools? Now, I could have put in here lots of statistics about how expensive poor health in teaching staff is and how much it affects budgets in teaching in schools. But actually, I've chosen to focus on the aspect of the experience of the young people and the children that will come into your care. So children spend a significant amount of time in school. It makes up a big chunk of their week in the school terms, and a larger chunk of their thinking time often around school as well. So the role of adults within that time to help them feel safe, to feel secure, to feel cared for is really, really important. We know that teachers are really important to children. Often they're one of a few adults that a young person will have regular interaction with. And these significant adults can be a real sense of security and strength for young people, especially for those who are in homes where they're struggling, where perhaps the relationships are not great, or there's concerns in regards to debt, to substance misuse, and where the challenges are greater for the children. We know that children learn and develop when they feel safe. They have to physiologically and psychologically feel safe to be able to use the front parts of their brain and to take that information in. And we know also that they learn often slightly subconsciously. We all learn from the modeling of behavior of the other people around us. So the way a teacher or a staff member or a lunchtime supervisor behaves models both any sort of behavior, helpful and unhelpful. We also understand and know that senses of well-being and stress and happiness can spread amongst groups of people. The role of stress or social contagion theory highlights that actually, if somebody is particularly feeling a particularly strong emotion, be it fear, stress, or silliness and laughter, it can spread across groups in ways that can be helpful and unhelpful. And trying to promote well-being means that we're promoting helpful ways of managing emotions and stress and tension across the school environment. So those are the reasons why staff well-being is so important. And there are several key aspects about why low well-being in staff is equally important and has a really quite detrimental effect. And I think this is probably true in all of our lives whenever we're feeling a higher level of stress or a low level of well-being. So the more stressed we are, the less we've got to give. We're unable to pay as much time and give as much energy to the people that we care about or the tasks that we care about. Everything feels a bit like it's starting to move a lot faster and building up. What we do know is that our ability to be effective in the workplace, and this is research about the teacher's effectiveness, but actually it's also been found in situations like the NHS and many other work environments, is that effectiveness is the result of how we can manage work-life stress and manage our sense of well-being and our sense of resilience in the face of additional challenges that are going on around us. And low well-being is strongly linked to an increased rate of illness, higher levels of absence from work, higher levels of health issues as well. And those levels of absence and health issues in teachers actually lead to increased disruption for the young people in their relationships with people that are important to them and in their sense of security within the classroom, the sense of being able to predict who's going to walk in and teach them that day. How well do they know that person? So low well-being really does affect you as a staff group in many ways in terms of how you try to do your job. And I haven't even gone down the aspect of talking about how low well-being affects personal lives as well. And that is important to consider and bear in mind as well. So we're thinking about, well, how important is it? You know, many of us feel like we have a professional face, and it doesn't matter how rubbish we feel, we go in and we do our best. And I think that's absolutely true for all of us. But there is an importance to it. There's about 8% variation in academic performance within classes that is attributable solely to the sense of teachers' well-being. And whilst that's quite an old statistic, it's 2007, actually they found similar statistics within the NHS. So they found that people's ability to recover, mortality rates as well, are actually linked to the levels of staff well-being in a particular service. So it's quite, you know, we're beginning to realise how important it is to look after the key people that help us and teach us when we need to. And then the one I like about this bottom statement, that teachers' occupational stress is linked to the students' physiological stress regulation. This taps into the kind of subconscious ways that how we feel, how our sense of being is influences on the pupils around us. And actually what it tells us is that children demonstrate high levels of cortisol when they're in a class with more stressed teachers, or a teacher who is feeling more stressed or struggling with their well-being. And that's also important for us to think about, because I think it's fair to say that actually maybe not enough attention has been paid to how we look after the well-being of teachers and also a wide range of key staff who care for all of us, I think it's fair to say. So there is still lots of research to really unpick all the mechanisms that are involved in this area. But I think that for each of us individually in the moment, we can start thinking about how we take care of ourselves for the benefits of both our life, but also for the children that we work with. So children need developmentally 3 core pillars And this comes from the Harvard Center for Child Development. And they talk about those 3 foundations of lifelong health being a stable and responsive environment and relationships, a safe and supportive physical, chemical, and built environments, and sound and appropriate nutrition. And what today's talk about really is about that idea of a stable and responsive environment of relationships. So this is where teachers and staff contribute the most to the child's development. And like the slide before said, children are their minds, their brains under construction. They're continually growing and learning. And the interactions that they have with yourselves are interactions that can really help them learn how to, not just knowledge, but also to regulate themselves and to manage the emotions and the situations that they're faced with on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to look now at how these mechanisms work, what are the routes by which children are influenced or impacted by our own sense of well-being. I've just put a few up here, but I think there'll be many more, but these encapsulate the main mechanisms. Some are really quite obvious to us, things like what we say, how we say it, our facial expressions, which can be really difficult to manage in a busy environment. It's very hard sometimes not to let emotions just slip across our face. And sometimes those emotions won't always be the most helpful for the child. They might be very real for you, but not always the most helpful for the child. Our behaviour is a really key aspect. Whether we are quick paced, whether we're slow, whether we're looking flustered, whether we're breathing quickly, whether we're banging things around accidentally or moving really swiftly between topics and not feeling like we have time for smooth transitions. The ability to really focus on a child and really give all of our presence in terms of giving attention. Not necessarily just the time, but that ability to look at a child and see them and quieten the voice in the back of our head that's going, you know what, I really haven't got time to deal with this. Or hang on a minute, how am I going to do X, Y, and Z as well? So attention is a key aspect that children pick up on. The physiology I've started to refer to in the previous slide. So the physiology is it's the chemical and physical signals we're giving off, many of which will be subconscious. We might not be paying attention to or be aware of. So a really key one is breathing. When people are struggling, when they've got low well-being, or when they're stressed, they might be breathing quite quickly and quite high in their shoulders and having a sense of anxiety that the children will pick up on, even though doesn't appear to be a difference in the words or the facial expression of the teacher, but the physical bodily sensation is there. I think also young people will pick up on the physiology of somebody who is exhausted and who is running out of resources and is feeling really fed up. And they pick up on the sort of flattening of emotion and effect. They pick up on the sense of a teacher going through the motions, but knowing that it's not totally authentic, that teacher's not totally there. I mentioned pace of breathing, pace of talking, pace of moving, pace of stopping in between sentences and activities are a really clear way that a children would absorb an urgency or a lack of urgency from us. And all of these things are being absorbed all the time through the 5 senses. And they are often being absorbed completely unconsciously. So the autonomic nervous system, which I'll talk a little bit about later, will be picking up all the signals around the child and checking out that they feel safe all the time, that they feel all right. Is there anything that they need to be picking up or be worried about? Most of it is processed subconsciously. I'd like to think that some of the processing going on in the young people in classrooms is conscious, and that's actually where the learning is going on, and the frontal cortex is engaged in taking in, learning and developing knowledge. But this unconscious, subconscious absorption of information means that they're picking up much, much more than what we might think they're picking up. And that will include a lot more information about our emotional and physiological state. Young people are way more attuned than perhaps the adults around them know that they are, or even wish them to be. And school itself can be complicated for young people who have the advantages in life and are what we would call securely attached. So young people who have a bit of resilience and feel able to explore and take risks and believe that there is someone there that will pick them up and care for them if they make a mistake or things go wrong. But if we think about how complicated school can be in a normal situation for young people who have multiple risk factors, perhaps those young people that struggle with their relationships with adults, who are insecure, those young people that have suffered bereavements or conflict in the family, then the shift in a staff member's well-being and being around a staff member with low well-being will have a much, much bigger impact on them, and make the world feel a much more unsafe place for them to be. And one of the things we're going to do now is we're going to look at a video, because this video is going to show us how mirror neurons actually are the mechanism by which this works. So they're the mechanism by which a child absorbs, often totally subconsciously, unconsciously, what is going on for the other adults that are in the room around them. Some of you may well have seen it before, so bear with me if that's the case.
But when you look at the details of how these neurons, the system of mirror neurons, how it works, then the exciting discoveries unfold. So if I were studying your mirror neurons, what would happen is if I did an action that was just totally random, your mirror neurons would not fire. If I did an action which had kind of repetition to it even, you may not be able to figure out what I was intending to do after just one or two repetitions. But if I were to take an object that would signify to you what I was trying to do, like this bottle of water, just notice what your feeling is. So you may have noticed that the feeling was very different when I had a bottle in my hand versus when I was just moving my hand in a similar way. What that tells us is that when you know the intention behind an action, a different system in your brain is activated. We now know that that system involves the mirror neurons and other areas of the brain, so that what you do is you follow a sequence of action. And when you can predict that sequence, you can determine what the implication of that sequence is. So when I have a bottle in my hand, you know I will continue to drink like this, not toss it at you, for example. That ability to understand the sensory implications, that is what you're going to see, of the motor actions that you're perceiving, allows you to create a map in the mind, if you will, that's correlated with neural firing patterns in this mirror neurons superior temporal area complex that creates a neural representation, a neural map of my intention in your head. In other words, beyond just seeing behavior, We see the intention beneath the behavior from the very beginning. Now, that's how we create the human capacity to imitate behavior. Bottle of water.
So I find this fascinating because what it shows us is that actually just watching somebody else do something that we think we can work out the intention creates a sense within us. We understand what they're doing, what they're feeling, and we can also experience to a degree what they're doing and what they're feeling. So one of the things you might have noticed when Dan Siegel was picking up the bottle of water is that you found yourself swallowing. You found yourself being slightly more thirsty than perhaps you were aware. And that's because our brain areas light up when we see other people doing things as well as when we do them ourselves. We'll explore this more as we go on. So Dan Hughes is a consultant psychologist who has developed what he calls PACE as a way of interacting with young people and really encouraging a sense of safety with them and a sense of ability to learn. And the reason I brought this in here is because these 4 words, playfulness, acceptance, curiosity, and empathy, are really useful to hold in mind when we think about how our well-being contributes to us being able to use those attributes when we're around the children that we're working with. So the better and the higher our well-being is, the more we're able to play, the more we're able to accept, the more curiosity we have about the world, and the greater our capacity for empathy. And when all of those attributes are higher, those young people's mirror neurons will be feeling that in a classroom and will be experiencing that. So we're going to move on and look a little bit now about actually what well-being is and the ways and things that you can use to improve and boost your well-being so that you feel that you can contribute more to those young people in your class's well-being as well. The Oxford definition of well-being, a state of being comfortable, healthy, and happy. It encompasses most things about well-being. I don't think it encompasses everything because well-being is it's a unique definition for each of us. We all have different things that make us feel comfy and different things that make us feel happy and feel okay. And it's important to also bear in mind that it doesn't necessarily mean that there is nothing challenging or no struggles or no adversity in somebody else's life. What we know is that there actually needs to be a level of adversity for people to be able to overcome, for them to be able to develop the self-efficacy to have a good and a high level of well-being. It's much more than just health, well-being, and it really does widen out to include social, emotional, psychological, as well as physical well-being. And it includes things like our ability to function well and to manage and maintain a quality of life that feels right for us, our family relationships, our ability to roll with day-to-day challenges, day-to-day dilemmas and difficulties, and also things like our physical health and ability to sleep, and a wide range of other aspects that have different significance to each of us. For some people, they might feel that family relationships are a priority for them, whereas for others, it might be their work where they find a sense-esteem and a self of feeling good. So it's different for us all. And the great thing about well-being is that it is something that we can influence. It's not just given to us. Well-being itself is something that exists separate to the external situations, and also actually to a degree separate internally as well. It is something that we can influence and alter and change, and to do so without a huge amount of difficulty. I like the idea of well-being as a balance, and a balance between the challenges that we're facing, whether it's globally, socially, politically, economically, whichever challenge, wherever it is, and about the resources that we have at hand to be able to manage that challenge. And those resources could be financial, they can be opportunities, they can be internal psychology, it could be our sense of self-efficacy, our confidence, asking for help. There's a whole range of resources that make up that balance. And, you know, I think I love this quote. It's not a beach you go and lie on. It's not, something that's handed to you, well-being. It is a dynamic dance, and that there's always movement. There are always moments you have your higher well-being or lower well-being. And it's the functionality of that movement, that ability to manage and bounce back and be resilient, that really reflects the true sense of well-being that people have. It doesn't mean that you're always happy or you don't feel sad or you're not affected by life. It means that it's kind of okay to be sad and affected by life and unhappy, because there's generally an overall sense that it will be okay. We can cope with what life gives us. We can roll with it. So if we're thinking of well-being as a balance, then it opens up a range of things that we can do to act. And we can try to reduce the challenges we're facing. And in times when the challenges that we face are beyond our control, we can then try and build up our resources. And either way has that same effect of improving and helping the balance. But one of the challenges is why it's so hard to prioritize. What is it that makes well-being feel like it's not the most important thing that we need to focus on? And these are just some common sentences that I hear all the time, and they're all reasons why it's really hard to prioritize. I think the one I hear the most is, I don't have time. I'm too busy. There's too much pressure on me. There's too many other things to do. And I think when you drill down sometimes into why it's so hard for us to prioritize and to look after ourselves, it's because we don't always recognize the benefits of doing it, of what it will bring to us and all the people around us. And also because we can feel very trapped in beliefs that have come from our childhood, actually, and that it feels like it's selfish or it might be weak. So to exploring those beliefs, Brené Brown did some fabulous research that really looked at whether or not we can recognize and value the emotions that we experience on a day-to-day basis. And by looking at the core beliefs that we gain as we grow up, often from our family environment, but not just from our family environment. There might be a work environment, an organizational set of beliefs around this as well. And there are 7 key ones that become a barrier to focusing and prioritizing on ourselves and our well-being. So the first one is that idea that vulnerability is weakness. The second one is the idea that actually you're not going to gain anything by talking about your emotions, asking for help, or gaining someone else to have your back. And that can be quite a strong family belief. No point in asking. Don't bother telling me. Nothing will change. There's no point. Having an emotional language is a really key point to being able to recognize how we're feeling and recognize where our well-being is at. And if we struggle to have a wide range of emotional language, it might be quite difficult to draw the line between feeling hassled, feeling stressed, feeling irritated, feeling angry. So we might just not take it seriously in ourselves, or we might be very quiet about it. There are some families that grow up with a belief about that it's just a waste of time, it's ridiculous, don't be so silly. We don't deal with emotions, no, we just get on with what we're doing. We need to be logical, we need to take the steps we need to take, we don't indulge. There are some situations where we find that actually we are so numb, there's nothing to say, you can't even begin to put it into words. Emotions are uncertain, they open up to movement, they're not nice and black and white, and that can be really uncomfy for people. They won't go there. And that actually sometimes there's a fear around emotions, there's a fear about asking for questions, exploring, am I doing okay? Because you might realize that you're not doing okay, and then that might seem like an enormous mountain to climb, and that it feels too challenging. And I think it's important that with all of these beliefs, it's important to recognize that sometimes they might be really helpful. It might be really useful sometimes to not discuss emotions and just get on and deal with the situation if you're in the middle of a crisis. But there'll become a time when you're outside of that crisis that actually staying in that mode of not paying attention to how we're feeling ourselves can end up in burnout and in stress because we haven't given the time to listen to what we need. And because all of our emotions have a physical basis, we need to hold in mind that these aren't just things that are floating around in our head, they're changing our body chemistry as well. And that's what we're going to move on and have a look at now. So well-being is about a balance. It's about a balance of the drive systems that underpin our emotions. There's three key ones. We have the drive system about motivation that produces dopamine. We have our soothing system, which is based on the chemicals of oxytocin and opiates, and it's about making feel all right. We can manage, we can feel okay, we can have social relationships. And then we have our threat system, which is a system that comes under a lot of pressure during time of crisis and during times of stress. And our threat system thrives on producing adrenaline and cortisol, which helps us manage, which helps us run away from tigers. But in our modern world, we need to have a break from that stress. And if we're living in a world where we have cortisol and adrenaline floating around our body all the time, that has a really negative impact on us. So what we find is that when we are under stress, when we are in what's called a fight or a flight situation, when we're constantly feeling like things are beyond our ability to manage, that's when we have a low sense of well-being. And what we can do now, and we're going to move on and talk about, is the strategies that we can use to help us move out of the stress and the fight or flight system and into both the soothing or the drive systems, where actually we function in a much healthier way. And to do both of those, we need to be able to activate and balance our autonomic systems, which are made up by the sympathetic and the parasympathetic systems. The sympathetic system is partly it's fight or flight, but it's also the motivational side of it. It gets us on, we do it. You know, a little bit of stress is good for all of us, but it needs to be balanced with the parasympathetic system, which is known as the rest and digest system. And that's the system that is associated with us just looking after ourselves a little bit, slowing down and having a bit of a break. And by increasing the balance in these two systems, we can increase our well-being. So most of the strategies that we will look at as we go through the next section of the webinar will be to look at strategies that activate the parasympathetic, activate the oxytocin, the feel good, the serotonin inside of the chemicals in our body. I'm fairly sure that most of you would have seen the NHS 5 Ways to Wellbeing, and they focus on these 5 key areas that have been found from the research by the New Economic Foundation to be very accessible, simple ways that we can use to access our daily lives and improve both our mental and physical well-being. And I think the key that I want to talk about today is to think about it, not just in terms of big changes that we need to build into our lives, but maybe the very small changes that can happen in a moment or in a minute, and that those small changes can build incrementally to improve our well-being and to improve our physiology. And they will help all of the people around us in their interactions as well. And the nice thing about the smaller changes is that actually they're quite simple to implement and they improve with practice. Our body gets into habits that are really healthy and good for it. I'm going to skip the odd slide because we're starting to run out of time now, and I wanted to focus on the science of kindness. So the science of kindness falls under the give section of the 5 ways of well-being. I will let us watch this and then we'll talk some more.
Sometimes it's easy to feel like the world's getting harder. But if we look closer, on the news, on the web, on the street, we're anything but unkind. Every day, we hear new stories of people trying to make the world a better place. And together, we can make the world that little bit kinder for all of us. It all starts with just one person, you. The thing about kindness is that it's just about the only thing in the world that doubles when you share it. And it's a fact, backed by science. Studies have shown that if you perform just one random act of kindness a day, you'll not only reduce your stress, anxiety, and depression, but your body is flooded with the same hormones that make you and the person you've helped calmer, healthier, and happier. Serotonin, which heals your wounds, helps you relax and makes you feel good. Endorphins, which reduce pain. And oxytocin, which reduces blood pressure and makes you feel more loving and loved. You'll both be more energized, feel less aches and pains, more confident, and could even live longer. And if other people see you helping someone else, they'll be filled with those same feel-good hormones, meaning they're significantly more likely to pay it forward. Like taking that extra moment to hold the elevator for someone, spotting a coffee for a stranger who's just a few cents short, giving your neighbor a hand with their groceries, even just smiling and meaning it. It doesn't take much, but it can make a huge difference for everyone. Those people you've helped will help other people, and those other people will help even more people. And those random acts of kindness can start a chain reaction that can spread across an entire community, a city, a country, and with enough of us, the world. Now, isn't that the world we all want? And it all starts with one.
I love that video. I think it highlights how important it is to give for our own well-being as well as for other people's. So you have both the impact in our own brain and the changes in our own chemicals, but also the role of mirror neurons with other people. And it's important as well because the idea of giving really ties into the concept of empathy that we talked about earlier, that as a main attribute for how well we work with young people and how it can benefit young people. Giving really does help promote our own sense of being able to be empathic to other people. And give is really important as well because we need to give to ourselves and to be compassionate to ourselves. And what we're going to look at next is the idea of self-compassion and how we can be our own friend and our own best friend through the use of self-compassion. And we're going to look at a clip now that comes from some videos that Christian Neff has made that talks about how self-compassion can change our sense of well-being, and how it can actually over time really help improve it and develop it.
Do you have a critical voice? And if so, what do you find it saying to you?
I definitely have a critical voice. I think everybody does. And I think they all start from when you're a kid. So, I think all the things that my parents said, I hear, but it's normally about not doing a good job.
It's constantly stopping me as I try to complete thoughts or try to make steps forward.
It's a voice that always tells me that I'm not enough, or that I need to do better, or that there's something about me that I have to change.
When you fail or make a mistake, what types of things run through your mind?
I'm not worthy. Everybody's going to see my mistake. Nobody else makes mistakes like I do.
You're stupid. I can't believe you forgot something easy. This was basic. Why are you having so much trouble doing something so simple?
People don't want me around, that I'm uninteresting, boring, and or just too weird for people's company.
It says that I should have done better, and sometimes it says mean words about myself.
It's probably the loudest thing that's usually coming through my head before anything else, is at least ringing that failure over and over again.
And let me give you a scenario where a friend of yours comes to you, has made a mistake, and what would you say to that friend?
Well, the first thing I would tell them that it's okay. You don't need to feel all the weight of this.
Most likely you're holding on to this more tightly than anybody else.
This in no way, reflects your character or reflects your ability to do something. Definitely a lot kinder to my friends than I am to myself.
How do you think you would change if you used that same voice that you use towards your friends on yourself during those moments of failure and mistakes?
I think it would be, incredible, because you're not going to talk to your friends the way that you talk to yourself sometimes. And I think that if you're constantly kind of reassuring yourself and letting yourself know that you are enough, then your thought process will change.
When you treat yourself like you do somebody else, you start feeling better, I think, right away, and you keep it in context much more instead of letting things be blown out of proportion.
I think I would have a lot less anxiety in my day-to-day. I think there would be kind of a weight lifted.
It would definitely make me feel better and happier, because when I usually say, when that voice that says mean stuff in my head, I'm not really happy and sad.
So the reason we chose to put this video in today is because our critical voice actually acts as a sense of threat. And when we experience threat, we can move into the fight or flight system within our body. And if we're regularly critical of ourselves, then our body regularly experiences the high levels of stress and cortisol that come from being in a sense of threat. And that doesn't help our well-being. So by being kind to ourselves, we can really increase the strength of the soothing system and allow that soothing system to increase our oxytocin and to develop, I guess, that higher sense of well-being that comes from that. And this is not to say that we need to be nice and kind and lovely to ourselves all the time. We do need some criticism. We need to motivate ourselves. We need to keep learning, but we need to be able to do that in a compassionate way, in a way that perhaps we would do so with our best friends. And by doing that, when we're looking out for our best friends, we're raising their well-being, and we can raise our own well-being at the same time by being kind to ourselves. So being kind to ourselves is about helping us reflect on what we're experiencing, about understanding the words and the emotions and the nuances of that, and being polite to ourselves as well, not calling ourselves names. And that people who are able to do this they have lower levels of depression, of anxiety, of stress, and higher levels of resilience in their life. And because it's not just an idea in our head, this plays out with us physically as well. So it physically helps us to reduce blood pressure. It helps us to increase health, along with a range of other aspects as well. It's not a single solution. None of these things are single solutions. But it's a really valuable tool that we can have, that we can introduce in very small moments on a day-to-day basis. And I like to think of self-compassion as this idea of kintsugi, I can never say it properly, which is a lovely concept that comes from the Japanese. And it's the idea that none of us are unscathed by life. We all have hairline cracks and chips, and have sometimes fallen apart and sometimes put ourselves back together. And that actually self-compassion is about putting ourselves back together with some gold by recognizing the beauty and developing that beauty from the lessons that we've had through life and from having those cracks and being broken on occasion and so on. And I think self-compassion is a form of self-empathy, and if we can treat ourselves with compassion, we will model it and treat other people with compassion as well. So it links back to pace, again, like I mentioned earlier. So the next slide that we're going to move on to, and the next of the 5 ways of well-being, is to look at take notice. And this is another short clip. This is courtesy of Sanctuary Housing. This clip is great.
Take notice. To take notice is to be present in the here and now. Pay attention to the world around you, nature, people, your thoughts and feelings. Be curious. Catch sight of the beautiful. Remark on the unusual. Notice the changing seasons. Savour the moment. Becoming more aware of the present moment and reflecting on your experiences will help you appreciate what matters to you.
So Sanctuary put together a series of 6 videos to look at the 5 ways of well-being. And I picked that one because I think it just is a useful way of helping us bring ourselves into the moment. And what you might have noticed from both giving and taking notice is it's about introducing a little bit of spaciousness, a little bit of a sense of time, day to day. And so the importance of noticing and being aware is really key. And it's more than perhaps the modern day concept that's floated around a lot about mindfulness, because it can be done in the moment, in the time. It's not a separate activity. And it's something that we've probably all done over time and lots of different things. So we've all had moments where we've been completely absorbed by something, whether it's music, whether it's cooking, whether we're out in the garden or we're singing, whatever it is. Those moments when we are just in the moment, we're not listening to our internal voices, we're not thinking of the past, we're not thinking of the future, we're not judging ourselves. And if we are doing our internal chat, it's not judgmental, it's just observational. And moments like this allow our body to just have a little bit of rest, a little bit of space, and that's really useful, because actually we've evolved as animals to have periods of fast pace and running from tigers and searching for food and excitement, and then periods of rest where we just slow down and stop. So that idea of being fully present in a moment, of paying attention in a particular way on purpose in the present moment and non-judgmental, is what underpins that concept of taking notice of what's going on around. And if we think about taking notice, we can link that back to the idea that Dan Hughes talked about acceptance. Okay, when we notice the children in front of us, we really listen to what they're telling us, whether it's through their words or through their behavior. And I think the good thing as well about stopping and noticing our own internal voices is we can then tell when we're being friends to ourselves or when we're not. When are our internal voices giving us unhelpful, critical commentary? And when is it useful to try and stop that and change that into something more compassionate? So there are a range of different ways to practice taking notice that can be done in the moment. It's not about, it'd be lovely if you can put aside 10, 15 minutes every day to take notice. But actually, sometimes it might be more helpful in the moment when you've got all the children around you, you're in the middle of your classroom, and just knowing that breathe in and then breathing out slowly. maybe not with the hand gestures, but then again, if you want the children to listen, maybe with the hand gestures. Breathing out slowly can give you that chance to just notice your breath. Focus in on it for even maybe 10, 15 seconds, however much time you have to do it at that moment. Just noticing your breath and being aware of how you're breathing, not necessarily changing it, but just noticing it. And then you might decide after a couple of breaths that you want to see what it feels like to breathe out slowly or breathe out for longer, or perhaps to hum. So both long, slow out breaths and hums, they activate the parasympathetic system. And this is something you can do with yourself, but also with other people and with children. When your parasympathetic system's activated, theirs is more likely to be activated too. Another lovely thing is body awareness. Just think about, are you stiff? Is there any part of your body that is holding some tension? Does it want you to move? Does it want you to breathe out through it? Having cues in your day-to-day life, like when you're boiling the kettle. How many people boil the kettle and then by the time they've come back to it, because they've been so busy doing other things, it's gone cold, they have to boil it again. Using that time for the kettle boiling, which might only be 2 minutes, as a time to stop and look out of a window or think about what you can hear or how your breath is. Another lovely way of doing it as well is to really look at something you like and try to look at it as a sense of how it contrasts with the world around it. What are the lines that divide it from the world around it? Is it, imagine what it'd be like as a picture rather than as a 3D object. So again, just allowing your brain to just stop having some of the internal chatter. And I think as well, one of the things we forget to do a lot, and this might sound a bit bonkers, but we forget about our feet. And our feet are the way that we are attached to the ground, and just feeling your feet going up on your tiptoes, wiggling them around, lifting them up and down. It's a really simple way that you can practice for a few seconds, as and whenever you want to, that will just give your nervous system a little bit of time to reset, and it will lower your emotional arousal in the process of that. And the more that we practice it on a day-to-day level, the quicker it is that we can move into that sense of relaxation. A lovely, lovely technique as well about how to take notice is the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 technique. And this is something that you can do in your mind, quietly to yourself, or you can share it and do it with the people around you. And it is as simple as 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 deep breath in and slowly breathe out. And the slowness of the out breath is really important, because that is what helps balance the CO2 and the oxygen in our body and helps reduce that sense of feeling stressed and over alert. And you can do that for yourself as many times as you need to until you feel better, or for the young people that you're with. So we will send out these slides to people and a list of the YouTube clips that go with them as well, because there's some lovely little mini meditations on Headspace that only take a minute to do and will guide you literally to give you some practice of how much better you can feel just by breathing slowly for a minute. But I won't go into those now because I'm conscious of the time. These are all techniques that are underpinned by research. Okay, so the research shows us that it develops resilience and motivation. It improves people's sense of self-efficacy and the sense that they feel okay with life, that life's all right. And it develops empathy, forgiveness of others. And I think it's fair to say that self-compassion really offers all the benefits of self-esteem and feeling good ourselves, but without perhaps the risks of falling into arrogance or any of those side effects. of too much self-esteem. So the other key aspects that 5 ways of well-being talk about are keeping learning. Bear with me. And focusing on our curiosity about life, about what makes us tick, what makes the children in our class tick, and learning for ourselves as well. So learning that feels, it could be of absolutely anything that we're interested in, but that sense that feels like we're investing a little bit in our life and what we want to get out of it. Movement is our next group that we're going to bear with me. I was just checking the chat there, so I got slightly confused there. So movement is another key aspect of the 5 ways to well-being, and this is something that we really can build in a lot everyday life. So even today, while I'm talking to you, I'm rolling my shoulders. And I've got a little internal voice in the back of my head going, well, you shouldn't really be rolling your shoulders in a meeting because you might look like you're fidgeting and you might look like you're not listening. And all those lessons at school where I was taught not to fidget and move, they're quite hard to overcome and get beyond. But there's also part of me that goes, actually, do you know what? If I move, I feel better and I can listen and move. And actually, do you know what? That sense of well-being from moving when I'm sat in a meeting or around a class or moving around is really important. And it can be something as simple as standing up, as swaying, as bouncing on the balls of your feet, or smiling, and even singing is a type of movement. And we can build these into our lives on a really simple level by looking at things like, where are we parking? What lifts or stairs have we got to go up? Can we increase where we're walking to? And I think as well for, actually, what do you do on playground duty? What do you do on lunch duty? How can you incorporate a little bit more movement on a micro level? Because not all of us can go for a run. I'm not great at running. And it's hard to sometimes find a bigger chunk of time to invest into moving. So investing it in small times, a lovely big stretch before you get out of bed in the morning or at the end of the day. It's all movement that helps your parasympathetic system. It helps your body improve its sense of well-being and the way it functions. So the last video we're going to watch is about social connection. And I like the way they've done this. I think it's really good. It's from Every Mind Matters.
It can be hard to connect with people sometimes, especially when we're busy, stressed, or feeling low. But there's lots of evidence that keeping in close touch can help us feel happier and healthier, whether it's with friends, family, neighbours, or people at work. It can even protect us against becoming unwell. There's lots of ways to lead a life full of healthy human interaction. How you choose to do it is up to you. Quality social connection comes in lots of forms, and usually the more connected you are, the better the benefits. So here's some simple tips for building better social connections into your life. Tip 1. Make plans. Make time to talk, set plans with people, and stick to them. Tip 2. Connect every day. Try to connect with family or someone you trust each day. This could include a fixed family time, where everyone puts away their phones and shares an activity, has a meal, or just talks. This doesn't just have to be close friends and family either. Even having casual friends and acquaintances can have benefits. Try joining a new club or going out to events to meet new people. Simply talking on the phone, exchanging emails, or the occasional text message to keep in touch. Tip 3. Connect with your interests. Have a look for events or courses in your local area that interest you. Fill up your diary. Go along and say hello to the people there. It's a great way of opening up opportunities to meet like-minded people. Websites like meetup.com have a wide range of local social groups around the UK. Tip 4. Reach out. Sharing your thoughts can really help, whether it's with someone you know, a volunteer, or professional. There's always someone who can listen. Have a think if there's someone you used to be close to, who you could reconnect with. When you're talking with someone, reach out and be curious by asking them questions about themselves. This can really help you make a good connection. There are also lots of fantastic helplines with trained staff and volunteers who care about what you have to say and can offer you help if you need it. You can find details on the Every Mind Matters website. Tip 5. Offer a helping hand. If you like, you can even volunteer your time to help others. Not only is it a kind thing to do, giving to others is also a proven way to improve our own mental health, and it's a great way to connect with other volunteers as well as the people you're supporting. Find something you're interested in, or a local charity, and get in touch to see if they need any help. Or you can even just offer a favour to a neighbour or help out a colleague at work. Connection is important. We can all do simple things to be a little more social and help those in our lives do the same.
So I think that video sums up really what I would have liked to have talked about when I was talking about connection with other people. It works in the same ways as improving and developing the oxytocin in our body, activating the parasympathetic, and helping us rebalance that sense of how we are in the world and how we're able to manage and deal with the challenges that we're faced with. It is really hard sometimes to reach out and connect with people when we're struggling and when our well-being is low, and it does take a deeper breath in some ways and a stronger motivation to do it. And I think holding in mind that actually if we do lift our well-being, our ability to connect with the children that we're with and the children we're supporting is really enhanced. And sometimes it's easier to do things for other people than it is for ourselves. So it's worth thinking about that as what motivates you, what gets that drive system to developing, working. So we're thinking about a work context now, and one of the things that I thought I'd draw everyone's attention to is the idea of a wellbeing action plan. And they are a really good tool that's been developed by Mind UK. And they have got guides on their websites. They're fantastic for doing your own wellbeing action plan. They've got a guide for managers as well. And they are a really useful tool for anybody and everybody, whatever situation they're in. Really, because it helps us focus our thinking. It helps us think about what makes us feel good. What little changes can we make in our day-to-day life to improve our well-being? And I think, as well importantly, it gives us a structure and a framework for a conversation about well-being and how we're doing in the workplace. And that can be really useful, because talking about how you're doing and how you think that's impacting on your work can be really tricky for both managers and staff as well. So using the structure of a wellbeing action plan is really a valuable way forward. And there's some really simple things you can include on it, many of which we've touched on today. We haven't gone near the ideas and the thoughts in terms of, more in-depth physical exercise, bigger lifestyle changes like changing diet, cutting down alcohol. We haven't touched on any of those areas. We focused a lot on those areas that are about our own internal conversations and our understanding of what our bodies need at the time and how to incorporate movement and so on in it. But the link is there and you will receive that. And it's really worth having a look at mind.org.uk to look into how a wellbeing action plan can actually support you boost your wellbeing. And it doesn't have to just be at work. This can be something that you do with your partner, with your children, with whoever it is that you're connected to that can look out for us. So thank you all for your time. I will check the questions in just a moment, without a doubt. I hope that you feel that we have covered what we said we were going to set out to do at the beginning, and certainly I've summarised some of the strategies here that you can take away. I think they are based on those 5 ways to mental health and 5 ways to well-being. There we go. I hope we've covered why does staff wellbeing matter in the classroom? How does it impact on children around us? what does it look like, and what tips and strategies can we use to help and boost our own well-being. I really want to stress as well that this is something that I think is manageable in small, little day-to-day changes. It's not here to, I don't want you to feel like, it's another onerous burden on a teacher that we have to look out for ourselves at all. That's not what I'd like to achieve. Now, let me see, I have a couple of polls that I might well try and do briefly. I have 2 questions that I'd like you to answer. And I will also put into the chat a survey that I would really appreciate. It'll take about 3 minutes of your time. At the end of this, it'll just help us develop the work that we do and improve, keep improving. So let me just see if I can somehow get this to work. I might have to just stop sharing for a moment. Bear with me. There we go. Okay, so that's the SurveyMonkey link. And then I hope, Natalie, yes, all your cameras and microphones are blocked. I do apologise. That's because it's a webinar. Brilliant. That's great. Okay, so there are a feedback poll here that I shall open up for a little while, and I'm going to stay around to be able to answer questions and respond.